Bloomberg Businessweek had a really interesting article about a high-rise and the guy who's building it. The high-rise is 157. It's in New York City, of course, and it's on 57th Street, and it's going to rise to about 90 floors. So it's going to have a great view of Central Park. Previously, they thought that that was a location that was not going to be as desirable for really high-end condominiums. Well, this guy, Gary Barnett, has done a great job through his company, Extell, of proving doubters wrong. And the heart of the article is about that. And when it comes to Gary Barnett's business acumen, I don't begrudge him that at all. I actually kind of like the story of him defying the odds. You know, he cut corners here and there and certainly pissed off a lot of people in the neighborhood. But I get it, and that's business, and you can disagree with those tactics as well. But what I found interesting in the article is a little throwaway section about taxes that they put in there, which is not a throwaway at all because it involves very, very large numbers and corruption. So they explain, along with the views of this complex that he's building, Barnett tempted buyers at 157 with something else, a tax break. In its condominium offering documents, Extell told buyers they would receive a 10-year abatement because the tower qualified for an affordable housing tax exemption. Now, strange as it sounds, the city had for years allowed developers of luxury buildings to purchase tax savings certificates from builders of actual affordable housing. The luxury developers could then use them at their shimmering towers. So this was originally for poor people, and if you want to be able to afford an apartment in New York, well, you might need some assistance in the form of a tax abatement. That makes sense. But of course, they created a scheme where it could be sold, and then rich people use it to avoid hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes every year. One example they give in this tower is somebody who was going to pay about $200,000 a year in taxes. You got to understand, some of these apartments go for $90 million for an apartment, okay? So now, instead of paying $200,000, they're only going to pay $18,000 because of this abatement. But we're going to run into some issues in a second. Now, Extell told its customers that this would be wonderful for them. The buyers of the 6-bedroom, 6-bathroom penthouse duplex on the 89th and 90th floors, for example, would see their annual real estate taxes fall in the first year from $205,883 to $18,415. So, boom, you just saved, what, over $180,000 there. Well over that, okay? For the richest people in the city, literally, okay? Now, when asked to justify this, Gary Barnett says, now wait a minute, you don't want to discriminate. I love this quote. He says, America has always been a very welcoming country. We welcome the poor and the downtrodden, but we also welcome the wealthy. Well, indeed you do. Indeed you do. Part of the reason he says that is because a lot of these apartment buildings are being bought by foreigners, Russians, Saudis, Chinese. Some of them are doing it as an investment. Some are doing it for the couple of weeks a year that they stop in New York. And a lot of them are empty, so it's foreigners, but the wealthiest foreigners in the world coming and buying these apartment complexes, okay, or condominiums. Now, his detractors, here's another twist you're going to love, were up in arms again in August when the city gave Extell permission to create a building with a separate entrance for affordable housing residents in an Upper West Side complex he's constructing. The anti-Extell forces call it a poor door. Now, according to the laws, in some of these buildings, you have to have affordable housing as well as the incredibly non-affordable housing, right? Now, that's a problem for the rich because they don't want to rub elbows with you. They don't want to have anything to do with you. So Barnett solves that problem, and he's not the only one, by the way. Trump and others do it as well, by creating a separate door and saying, if you live in the affordable housing part, you must enter through that door. You cannot enter through the door that brings you into the same building, but that's reserved for only rich people. If you thought the elites had not run amok yet, okay, I mean, I don't know that there's a better example than this. So speaking of which, we go to Donald Trump, and he thinks this is a lovely idea. He says, your luxury people would prefer that. It's no big secret. Whether it's politically correct, I couldn't care less. Your luxury people would prefer that. I'm sorry for being so unluxury. Well, now here's where the story takes a twist. Bloomberg Businessweek explains there was only one problem. Barnett says he was stunned to discover after he'd begun selling units that the abatements no longer applied. They'd been phased out in 2007 as part of an effort by then Mayor Michael Bloomberg to end the subsidies in many parts of the city where the real estate market was booming. So now these tax credits, basically, they have to get renewed every once in a while. They ran out in 2007. Bloomberg was the mayor at the time. Bloomberg Business Week is owned by him, but it has nothing to do with one another. So understand that this is a report coming from Bloomberg Business Week, not Mayor Bloomberg himself. Now, in that case, I don't know that Mayor Bloomberg deserves any credit. They just simply ran out and they were not renewed. So maybe credit for not renewing them. Okay, so hey, don't worry about it. You still got the poor door, but at least they're not going to avoid all those taxes which, by the way, would go to help educate New York City children, help with transportation and all those other things, right? And obviously these guys could afford those, right? So problem solved. That's not the way America works. So if one politician didn't do it for you, you just go bribe another one. These bribes are perfectly legal. What you do is you say, I'm going to give you a campaign donation, and then I'll see if you reinstitute that tax credit for me. So let's see what happened here. In January of 2013, Governor Andrew Cuomo, a so-called Democrat, by the way, signed a bill that reestablished them at 157 and the luxury buildings of 4 other developers. He did so shortly after his re-election campaign committee deposited 2 checks totaling $100,000 from companies sharing addresses with Extell affiliates. Get a load of how sickening that corruption is. He does the tax credits for only 5 buildings, some of which are owned by Extell, which just gave him $100,000 in campaign donations. Is that clear enough? No. These are perfectly legal. We're told that these are not bribes, that those 2 things are totally unrelated. He just happened to pick 5 buildings in New York. They happen to be owned by the people who gave him the $100,000. What a wonderful coincidence. The combination of very large campaign contributions. Now, look, this is the Moreland Commission report. Cuomo said, do a commission, investigate corruption. You can investigate me as well. And they concluded, the combination of very large campaign contributions and very narrowly targeted benefits to those same donors creates an appearance of impropriety that undermines public trust in our elected representatives. So Cuomo sees this from the Moreland Commission and he goes, oh, that's really interesting. And then, quote, in March, Cuomo disbanded the Moreland Commission, insisting it was no longer needed. You see, his donors came in through the rich door. They were the luxury people, and they deserved those tax breaks. Now, those tax breaks, we did a rough calculation here, and I invite reporters in New York to do a more meticulous calculation. But based on the numbers provided by Bloomberg Business Week, multiplied by the number of apartment condos that there are in those 5 buildings, it appears that these tax credits could cost New York City about $100 million a year. And this law goes for 10 years, and then you'll have to see if they renew it or not. But let's just take those 10 years. 100 million times 10 is about $1 billion. So a $100,000 donation to a politician gets you a return of about $1 billion. This is the current state of American politics, where anything can be bought. Corruption has become systemic. It has taken over the body politic, and it is treated as regular course of affairs. And if anyone dares investigate it, it immediately gets shut down. You wonder why we started Wolfpack. This is among the reasons why. You go to wolf-pack.com and you figure out how to fight back against these guys. We're going to come through their door, but it ain't going to be through the poor door. wolf-pack.com.